Chronicles audience. Today I'm just kind of like gonna speak on it a little bit. I hadn't really done any of that recently, just kind of come out and talking on a topic, but there was something that occurred outside of what we typically do. Like we kind of, our conversations are obviously pretty spontaneous, but we always know what we're going to talk about well in advance, right? So um, the reason I'm up here today and I was talking about this specific topic is I used to do another channel where I just kind of dealt a little bit more with just like media in general, not specifically mythology like I've been kind of focused on here. But the same theme about how important images matter is something that we've been consistent about. Me and Tennis, whenever we have a show, we always try to have images for you guys that kind of reflect the culture extremely well. And I had made a video a while back talking about this show here you see on my screen here, Hong Kong Phooey. It's probably a show a lot of you guys remember if you're my age. I was born in 1972. I talked about Hong Kong Phooey, and I talked about this other show here on my other side. I'm sorry, pointing the wrong way, which is Rickety Rocket, right? These are two shows from the 70s. Again, I'm a child of the 70s, so this was heavy influences on me as a kid. And what I said was pretty simply that I felt like both these shows were racist or had very strong racist elements to them. And that's kind of what brought me to talking about the show. This show, both these shows, excuse me, this show Hong Kong Phooey was very popular. It debuted in, I got some notes on this thing here. This debuted in, when was it? 1974. So this show ran on ABC, one of the three major networks, from 1974 to 1976. And I expressed that, the main character was this janitor slash hero who was Hong Kong Phooey, who was portrayed, let me see if I can find the images of the guy who portrayed Hong Kong Phooey. Oh, no, I've got it here. Let me see here. But he was portrayed by Scatman Carruthers. This show ran, like I said, for multiple years on a pretty large platform. And then it would later go into like a couple of different types of like, I don't know if they did a reboot on it or what, actually what they did. But it would always appear on like these large shows about like, in general, cartoons. Like it might be in a stream, not specifically just an ABC programming, but on other streams. This is who was portrayed by the actor Scatman Carruthers. Okay, so my issue with this entire show was that, with both of these, that this was the image of the janitor hero, that he was kind of a buffoon. That of course, obviously, he wasn't very articulate, and I was like, this is bad imagery to show kids. I got a lot of pushback on that channel. It's a little, like I said, it's a different format. But I wanted to talk about what the images of this actually meant to me and why I found this to be this way. So we know this character, Scatman Carruthers was a very successful actor. He played a lot of roles, and he typically played roles of servitude. And I talked about to one of the commenters who came back to me, is that there's something that makes a certain group of us comfortable with seeing dark-skinned people in roles of servitude. And that was something that I felt that a character like Scatman Carruthers gave him for years. So that's what brought my attention to first looking at this. And then, of course, the idea of Rickety Rocket, like, the kids from the ghetto. I mean, this is sometimes about what we aspire to be, right? What we want. And even in my fantasies where I get to get into a spaceship, right? This is a spaceship I get here, right? We get the broken down spaceship, right? The spaceship with the big lips. Like, I don't understand the imagery that we're seeing here, but these were things that I talked about. And we've looked at media from the past. Like I said, media always matters. It's always, media and mythology, none of this stuff is really relative unless we look at history. So we know what was going on at this period of time. This is the early 70s. We're just really coming out of the civil rights movement, where literally people have been fighting to prove that they were 100% equal, right? So this idea here of Rickety Rocket being like, this is what the black kids can aspire to. And we understand how powerful images are. We say all the time that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I absolutely believe that. I believe that 100%. And in my personal life, like as we've been coming forward, in our studies, I've been on to Medunetia, right? We've talked about this a lot on the show. And the Medunetia is all about deciphering, the language that was written by the North Africans and the Sudanese, that was written in stone. And that's really relying on images, because they're telling you a lot more through these images than words would ever describe. Like we see the Pejet crown, and we understand now that this means the unification of the two kingdoms and what that actually meant politically. So there's a lot more that's going on in that image than just a picture. And that's what we see in both these. This is what we get with Hong Kong Phooey. So my message was that, hey, I don't understand why, if we want, black people want their children to aspire as well. And we understand that when you're a child, these images are more impactful. So just the idea that we see repetitively of the janitor hero says something about what we want our kids to aspire to be. But we also understand who is producing that. And I, again, talked about this character, Catman Carruthers, and some of the roles he played. That seems to kind of portray that idea of that kind of perpetual kind of servitude, right? And obviously it makes some people very, very comfortable. Just like when they wanted to recently change the image of Aunt Jemima, right? They took Aunt Jemima off the syrup, and it was actually painful to this little blonde girl in Arizona that she actually went to court to try to sue them for doing that because she was comforted by the image of Aunt Jemima, even though it doesn't show that she was chained up. Like if the syrup bottle actually had a chain around it, it'd probably be more accurate. I'd be like, okay, leave Aunt Jemima on the syrup bottle as long as you've got the chain around her leg to show what's actually going on, because that image would be very impactful for them. So they get to sell the comfort of Aunt Jemima syrup. We know your pancake syrup is going to be great. Nobody questions that. So as soon as you see her, you grab it and you get it because you know her pancake syrup is going to be great. But put a chain around her and I bet it changes your idea about it, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at. So I started looking at Rickety Rocket as well, which ran a little bit later, right? This one came out in 1979. So a little bit of gap there. But I wanted to see what else was running on media, on big media at that same time. This is again in the 70s. What other images did we have there? So I went back and I started looking at some of my favorite shows. And again, I'm going to talk about some of these shows. Some of these are my favorite shows as well. We also had this show, Sanford and Son, which was a huge show that also debuted in 1972. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the whole story about Fred, who was the junk man who lived in Watts, I think it was, right? Not bad people, not bad people again. But again, we have this theme of, right, the junk man. So I started saying, okay, what else was going on in 1972? And of course, we had Good Times, which debuted like in the 70s as well. Now, Good Times during that period of time also had a pretty insightful episode where they talk about imagery in the form of Black Jesus. And I'm sure if any of you saw this episode, it was one of the bigger episodes, one of the more controversial to me episodes, where JJ had painted this character as Jesus, and unfortunately it was Ned the Wino. That's also significant to what they're doing to the image of Black Jesus, that it was actually based on Ned the Wino, right? So we've already got some negativity there. So of course Florida, who's very devout and Christian, doesn't like the idea of there being a Black Jesus. She's comfortable with her white Jesus. And like I said, I have friends and family who are Christians. I don't necessarily have an issue of how you portray your God. That's a very personal thing, what you want your God to be or what your God looks like to you. And I get that. But I think at the same time that we can kind of reconcile the notion that images do matter. And that if you hold someone in that regard, if you look at a person and they look like the image that you have of God in your own head, that's going to have some powerful effect in your subconscious. So we can't pretend like these subconscious things don't matter. Right, so that's kind of where I've been with shows like Good Times. So this is again some of the images that we're seeing right at that period of time coming out of major television studios, all about images, the images that we're showing of ourselves, or people are writing about us most of the time, but how we're portraying. The other thing I looked at within the show Good Times was obviously these two characters here. Let me get this out of the way. One of them here, we just saw James Evans. The other one was Bookman. And that kind of ties in with again, Chico and the Man was another one. Chico and the Man, that's very, very powerful imagery because we know who the man is, right? So that's exactly what we're on here. So this image here is also, going back from Good Times, you either had a small batch of choices for your hero character, especially if you're looking at the adult male. You either had James, who was perpetually underemployed or unemployed, or Bookman, who was at best, he showed stability in what he was doing, but again, he was the janitor. And again, this is not to trash on people in service industry work. My grandfather's a janitor. My grandfather had like 27 jobs. No BS. My grandfather did everything. He had his own little side businesses, no criminal enterprises. My grandparents were very hardworking people. He just had to do a lot of jobs to make ends meet for his family, and he was willing to do whatever. So he did work like that. So I'm not condemning that. But also, my grandfather also aspired for us to be something more than that. He was a very intelligent man. You know, my grandfathers would invent stuff, just insanely intelligent. But obviously, they were in that period of time they were denied as much opportunity. So I'm not even condemning people who work in that industry. I'm simply saying that this is a repeated image that we're coming down with. Another image that I was looking for, I'm like, what was going on around the 70s again? And I pulled another image out, and this is the image. If I can find this one here. Okay. One of my favorite shows, again, I grew up watching this, was also Fat Albert, right? So if I look at, I got Fat Albert, okay? One of the things, and this may have been very accurate to Bill Cosby's actual life. I'm assuming that the characters were based on him and his friends from his childhood. The fact that they hung out in the junkyard never struck me as that, but they are hanging out in the junkyard, right? This is something that we're showing. They are hanging out in the junkyard. So you got Fred, who's at the junkyard. You got Scatman Carruthers, who's the custodian. You got Boogman. We're getting a lot of cleaning up. We're getting a lot of help imagery going out, right? There's a lot of help imagery going on here, right? And this isn't even getting to the larger stuff. Like, there's an episode of Little Rascals. This sounds crazy. And if you guys remember this, there's an episode where Mrs. Crabtree, their teacher, the beloved teacher, is going to get married. Okay? And of course, the kids are devastated because back in this day, if you got married, you were now a housewife, you didn't work, you didn't teach anymore. So they were going to lose their beloved teacher. Well, all the kids, Stymie, Alfalfa, they all love Miss Crabtree, right? This is devastating for them. And each of the kids kind of, were reflecting their own thoughts about what marriage was. You know, the boys, of course, who were the He-Man woman haters, were like, marriage is this, and all this stuff they tell you, negative about marriage, or positive things about marriage. But Stymie, the one black kid, Stymie, said, my dad told me he don't believe in marriage. And I was like, wow, why is it that the writers, because people wrote this isn't what really Stymie said. Stymie didn't really say this, right? That wasn't the kid Stymie, and he just expressed himself. Some writer, and we know how scripts are developed. Scripts go through revisions and rewrites. It's a lot of work before they give you an approval to go out and shoot a script. The thing goes before a set, people rehearse it, you shoot it, you edit it for that to come out. There's a lot of hands that go into that. But they felt like it was important to put that message out that the black kid, his daddy tells him they don't believe in marriage. So we understand that there are messages that are put out even in the most subtle ways. And in fact, the ones that come out in the most subtle ways are the best ones. When I can slip something in on you when you're not paying attention, when I can tell you something about your own culture and your own people while you're kind of caught up in the other parts of the story, that's the best thing I could do if that's what my goal is. And I think we saw a lot of that kind of imagery going around, particularly during that period of time, right? So another one. So again, we're jumping off of what was on mainstream media, and I thought, man, what was going on in comic books, right? And this was one of the most off the hook stories I've ever seen. You guys have to research the story because it almost sounds unbelievable. Okay, all right, this is a good one here. I'm telling you, this is a great one. In fact, all right. If you guys know Marvel Comics at all, I'm a big Marvel Comics guy. This character here is called Necra. She's a villain from the Marvel Universe. She was paired up with another villain character who was called the Mandrill, okay? And these two were linked by a very, very big tragedy, okay? A tragedy that's filled with racism, by the way. I don't care what's going on. Tragedy, explosions, we're going to put some racism in this, right? And again, this is like 1973 that these two characters first debut in Marvel Comics. And I always talk about how history is relevant to media. In this case, it's 100%. So the story is that these two individuals were linked through an experiment that damaged their parents. Okay? Like a lot of comic book characters, you get your powers through some type of accident. Somebody's working at a lab. And that's the case. Mandrill's dad worked at the lab. Necra's mom worked at the lab. Okay? Now, what happened was Mandrill's dad, who happened to be white, I know, it looks odd, we're going to get to that. His dad happens to be white, was a scientist at the lab, okay? Now, Necra, whose mother is black, happened to work at the laboratory as a cleaning lady. All right, so we're going to establish that right now, okay? We're very firm on what kind of roles that people can play. And whatever kind of experiment was going on, I don't know if they were smashing atoms or or I don't know what they were doing, okay? Whatever it is, it switched these two genetically. So that although Necra was born to two black parents, she came out completely white. Mandrill, on the other hand, who was born of two white parents, came out well looking like this. I guess this is what they're calling, but yeah, you can see the difference here, okay? They get swapped energy, so she gets the white genetics, and she comes out she's still pretty hot. Necra would not have a problem in our community, right? Let's look at Necra. She got a nice Beyonce outfit on. Her hair is long. She's very pale, but hey, some people really like that, and she's nice and curvaceous. On the other end, if you get the black genetics, what the comic books are telling us is that you end up looking like that right there. You don't just look like a black guy. You look like a monkey, right? So that's the thing. It's something that even in the context of the story, they never talk about it. But if you're the writer, why would you why would you take that he got black genes and now him getting black genes means that he is now a monkey? So that was the thing. Like, we were constantly bombarded with images that were just like this, or storylines that were just like this, that were sometimes just blatantly racist. I get the idea. It came from the British. I understand where that came from. I'm saying the images here, under the context of living in America, we saw repeated images of the Junkman hero. Not to say that even that figure is bad, but it's like, man, we got that images so much. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of touch on this because I kind of wanted to see whether I was interpreting all this wrong, especially with the stuff with Hong Kong Phooey. Was I blowing this out of place? But this seemed like a very accurate, well planned out portrayal using a character that we can kind of see how he's always been depicted, right? So, again, I'm open to kind of saying, there was a time when this stuff was seen in media as okay, but it still had the same impact. If we look at Warner Brothers, they released a box set of the Looney Tunes a few years back. And at the very beginning of the series, this is back when the DVDs were out. So many kids probably don't remember that. They release an apology that basically says we're acknowledging that there's a lot of racist themes within our cartoons. This is more reflective of the period of time and the writers and executors at that time, and less representative of what Warner Brothers wants to represent now. So if we can at least look at some of the context, we saw Tom and Jerry with the image of the black mammy. That wasn't by accident. These characters weren't real. Someone actually created these characters and create these scenarios so they could give us a specific message. So that was just my shout out for today. It was more of just kind of a rant. I just wanted to get into this one because it was kind of from the heart. But as always, we'll be back on track. I got some new videos coming up for you guys soon. And always stop in 9 World Chronicle. You're appreciated.